Hey guys, you know, not a week goes by now that you do not hear about some Christian leader whose ministry has been completely destroyed because of some personal sin. And when I look into many of these guys as to what they believe, it's amazing to me how many of them would stand behind their pulpits and tell their congregation, or anyone else for that matter, how they had repented of all of their sins. And many of them would also be guilty of calling many people false converts, pointing fingers and condemning other people for being false converts when they themselves were the biggest slaves of sin. The hypocrisy, of course, is stunning and it is disgusting, but it's not new. Because when we go back to the Gospels, we can see that our Lord Jesus Christ saved his most biting criticism, his most biting rebuke for the religious hypocrites of his day, the scribes, the Pharisees, and the Sadducees. Those guys walked around in long flowing robes and they acted as if they were more holy and more righteous than everyone else. And yet, they were the biggest slaves of sin. They were the biggest hypocrites in Israel. When you go back to John chapter 8, we read the account of the woman who was caught in adultery. And they brought her to our Lord Jesus Christ and said, "We just caught this woman in the very act. Now the law of Moses said that she needs to be stoned. What do you say?" And of course our Lord Jesus Christ stooped down and began writing in the ground. And shortly afterwards, everybody hightailed it out of there. Everybody ran. Because like so many people, I believe that our Lord Jesus Christ was exposing their hypocrisy. He was exposing their individual sins, and they all ran. I'm thinking about the scandal that erupted last year with the whole Ashley Madison website. That website was specifically created so that men could cheat on their wives, and it came out that literally hundreds of Christian leaders had signed up to that website. They had accounts on that website, and many of them had to leave their ministries because of that. Because when the controversy erupted, their name was leaked to the public, and everybody found out what they were doing, and many of them had to leave the ministry because of it. And of course, many of them, when you go back and you look at what they believed, many of them, would preach that they had repented of all of their sins, and many of them would call people false converts. When you look over the last 10 years, just look at all the Christian ministers who've been busted because of all sorts of sins. Adultery, multiple times, child pornography on their computers, buying drugs from a local drug dealer. Many of them were caught in homosexual acts, and it just goes on and on and on. And yet many of those hypocrites would stand behind their pulpits and would tell people that they had repented of all of their sins, and also condemn other people for not living up to a certain standard when they themselves were not even living up to their own standard. As I said earlier, the hypocrisy is stunning, but it's not new. It's been going on for a long time now. If you're not living it, don't preach it. Okay? Don't preach it. Don't point fingers at everybody else and condemn everyone else for not living a certain way if you yourself are not living in that, not living up to your own standard. Our Lord Jesus Christ said in Matthew chapter 7 to take the beam out of your own eye before you take the speck out of somebody else's eyes. All right? If you're not living it, don't preach it. All right? Hypocrisy is something that should not be a part of a Christian. But unfortunately, there are many people standing behind the pulpits right now, and many Christian leaders in general who are very good at pointing fingers at everybody else, and yet they themselves are not even living up to their own standards. Okay? Telling everybody that they have repented of all of their sins, and yet they're the biggest slaves of sin. As I said, if you're not living it, don't preach it. God bless.